Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Kirby Smart, the Georgia Bulldogs, land their first commitment from the transfer portal cycle as former Vanderbilt wide receiver London Humphreys commits to the Georgia Bulldogs. And this is a guy that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, if you guys have been rocking with us, and a guy that I am extremely excited about. And if you are an SEC fan, and that means watching a lot of SEC football, including Vanderbilt, you know London Humphreys, and you kind of know what he brings to the table. This is a guy that is kind of a big play machine. You take a look at his true freshman year at Vanderbilt in an offense that, flat out stunk for a majority of the season. London Humphreys was one of those lone bright spots in this Vanderbilt offense, 22 catches for 439 yards. And the number I have circled on my note sheet here, 20 yards per reception. This is a guy that is going to attack that deeper third, be a wide receiver that can hit that big play. And in an era of college football where hitting the explosive plays is a must on the offensive side of the football, London Humphreys is going to bring that to this Georgia program. And we've said it before, like, this is not a Georgia program that's going to go out and bring 20 plus guys from the transfer portal because they just are too talented. I don't even know if there's 20 guys in the transfer portal that are going to elevate this Georgia roster. London Humphreys is one of them because of the role he can play in the offense in terms of stretching the field, in terms of being that deeper third threat that opposing defenses have to match. Want to talk a little bit about London Humphreys, how he fits into this Georgia offense, and then talk about a few other emergent prospects for the Georgia Bulldogs in the transfer portal. Before we get into it, just want to say thank you to you guys and a sincere thank you to the Georgia fans. We have talked a ton of Georgia football, all the Go Dogs in the comment section. I appreciate you guys. You guys' support allows us to do this. So can't thank you guys enough. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And without further ado, let's get into London Humphreys. So London Humphreys was a guy that didn't have a ton of buzz coming out of high school. And so I go kind of look back into the high school recruiting profile of London Humphreys. And I know the Nashville connections to Vanderbilt. That makes sense. I'm surprised that there weren't more Power 5 teams, more SEC teams looking and doing some work on London Humphreys coming out of high school. This is a guy that you take a look at the prospect coming out of high school, a 10.6 100-meter dash time, absolutely cooking. At 6'3", 190 pounds, was a state champ in the long jump. This is a phenomenal athlete that I'm kind of surprised that a lot of Power 5 teams weren't necessarily interested in when he came out of high school. He goes to Vanderbilt, has a phenomenal first year, and again, a Vanderbilt offense that was not very good. This is a guy that I'm extremely excited for to wind up in Athens. And what I kind of build on here is you see a lot of the big fish in the transfer portal transferring out, and they got 1 year of eligibility left, right? They're one, and they're going to the NFL draft. London Humphreys is a guy that's going into his second year of college football, and Kirby Smart, there is a reason this Georgia team competes for a national title every single year. Like, there's no like rebuilding, reloading year. This is a team that every single time you enter into August is at the top of the leaderboard in terms of winning a national championship because they continue to get youth into this roster that's extremely talented. You'll see other teams go and grab 25 guys in the transfer portal that have 1 year of eligibility left, and then the next year they're trying to do the same thing. Georgia, one, recruits at the high school level better than anyone in the country, develops out of high school better than anyone in the country. They don't need to consistently go into the transfer portal and reshape this roster. They're just going out and trying to find some value, some guys that are going to come into this program and impact either the offense or the defense. And a guy like London Humphreys is going to have an impact. And that impact is going to be stretching the field and being that explosive wide receiver again. 20 yards per catch, an insane number. Something that also stood out to me, 16 yards average depth of target. And this is a guy that's not necessarily taking those short and intermediate routes and running the football yards after the catch. This is a guy that makes safeties respect what he can do in terms of his route running down the field, attacking that deeper third. And when you have a wide receiver that can kind of take the top off of the defense and safeties have to respect, one, that helps your run game, right? You're going to see a little less loaded boxes when you have a guy like London Humphreys who can stretch that field, and it also opens stuff up underneath. And Carson Beck, a guy that loves to work the middle of the field, when you have these safeties having to respect a guy like London Humphreys pushing the ball down the field, the middle of that field is going to become very open for guys like Oscar Delp to work that middle of the field. I love the fit that London Humphreys is. I love the athlete that you're getting in London Humphreys. Again, 6'3", 200, almost 200 pounds, a 10.6 100-meter state long jump champ. checking all the boxes. A really nice get for the Georgia Bulldogs and a young guy that's going to have plenty of eligibility to develop in Athens. I kind of see London Humphreys, and this isn't necessarily a knock on Arian Smith, but kind of doing what we wanted Arian Smith to do on a more consistent basis, right? Arian Smith, a guy that we know is one of the fastest players in college football, obviously struggling to stay healthy, and kind of the consistency of Arian Smith has kind of lacked. And London Humphreys could come in and kind of play that role. So really excited about London Humphreys, and want to talk a little bit about what Georgia is doing elsewhere in the transfer portal. And the name that you see continuing to pop up, Trevor Etienne from Florida. And this is a guy that most Florida Georgia fans know, like one of the best running backs in the SEC. The numbers back it up. The film backs it up. And what Trevor Etienne did behind a Florida offensive line that was far below average in the SEC is extremely exciting to see what Trevor Etienne can do in Athens, Georgia, behind a Georgia offensive line that is going to be as dominant as this one's going to be. And again, you're going to lose some guys on the offensive line. Yeah, take a look at this 2024 class and the offensive line Georgia is bringing in. They're going to be just fine up front. And you have a running back in Trevor Etienne, who I think is one of the best backs in the SEC and in the country coming into this Georgia team. I can't wait to see what Trevor Etienne might look like wearing a Georgia helmet, running behind that Georgia offensive line. I also love the fit. Like in some of those outside zone concepts, like Trevor, that's where Trevor Etienne excels. Kind of that one cut, I'm going to get downhill, be very explosive. I think the fit really works. And then lastly, Trevor Etienne, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Trevor Etienne was targeted 22 times last year out of the backfield, caught all 22 of those passes. Very good pass catcher out of the backfield. And we remember how this Georgia offense looked with James Cook, having a lethal running back that can be a pass catcher out of the backfield. Man coverage with linebackers, getting the ball in the flat in space and making people miss. That's kind of what Trevor Etienne brings to the table. So you look back at, and again, James Cook, a little bit of a different running back than Trevor Etienne, but both had that ability to catch out of the backfield. I'm very excited to see what Trevor Etienne looks in this Georgia offense. And the last guy I want to talk about, former defensive lineman from South Carolina, Xavier McLeod, 6'5". He's up to 320 pounds after his first year at South Carolina. I mean, had a ton of potential coming out of that 2023 class. Didn't work out at South Carolina. What better spot to come to than the Georgia Bulldogs to develop a big body on the inside of that defensive line? And this is something that we've talked about. If there was one kind of hole in this Georgia defense, and I say this being comparatively to what we've seen in the past from Georgia, it was the difference makers on the inside. I mean, there wasn't a Jalen Carter. There wasn't a Jordan Davis. There wasn't a Devontae Wyatt on that inside. And I'm not knocking a guy like Warren Brinson or Nazir Stackhouse, very good football players. They weren't the dominant football players that you saw Georgia have in the past. And you look at a guy like Jamal Jarrett or Xavier McLeod or Jordan Hall. These are the guys that could be those game wreckers. They at least have the body type and the athleticism to be those game wreckers. You bring in a guy like Xavier McLeod, you can never have enough bodies like 6'5", 320 on that inside of the defensive line. And what's always made Georgia so special up front is it's not only the Jalen Carters that they had, it's the depth that they had and the ability to kind of rotate those big bodies in and out. That's the key to this Georgia defense. And adding a guy like Xavier McLeod, who can be maybe that first year a depth, a rotational piece, and quite frankly, blossom into one of those dominant defensive linemen. I mean, you're really excited about that. And you trust Kirby Smart to get the most out of a kind of guy like Xavier McLeod. And I mean, going back to Georgia's strategy in the transfer portal, this is not a program that's going to overturn this roster. And I get there's been a lot of, I don't know, maybe negative news might be the right term in terms of a lot of guys transferring out. This team's going to be just fine. Like a lot of those guys who were transferring out were just guys that weren't necessarily going to get the playing time. When you recruit at the high school level, like Kirby Smart and the Georgia Bulldogs do, you're going to have guys leave the program to go start elsewhere. You know why? Because they can start elsewhere. The fact that they can't start at Georgia just kind of tells you how loaded this Georgia team is, specifically on that defensive side of the football. Georgia is going to add pieces in the transfer portal. They don't need to add a lot. They just need to add a few difference makers. Xavier McLeod, Trevor Etienne, London Humphreys being guys that we've identified. We'll keep you all updated. I think Trevor Etienne, I think we'll be talking Trevor Etienne as kind of a Georgia Bulldog pretty soon. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.